Super touring, Japanese style. Good afternoon from the northernmost island in Japan, home of the high-speed ring, known for being built during that eccentric time of Japanese financial gain. You've seen a lot of sponsors in Formula One. Um, One such rebellious uh, local had built a circuit in the mid 90s to accommodate his love of NASCAR, as well as the national championships of touring and sports cars. Since that day, it did fall into a bit of a demise, but as you can see, the facilities have been given an upgrade. Very, uh, very much a top-notch circuit. The actual track hasn't really changed. It will be on the calendar, which we'll go into shortly. But another run of the drone cam in the hands of Michael Swinnerton alongside me, Adrian Michael Rees. Good afternoon, Swinny.
Yes, hello. I'm getting the hang of this drone now.
So before we go into the cars, it's another 11-round championship, such as the successful model of the Super Touring franchise, the expansion to Japan. Um, there's talks of doing an American championship. Whether that means all the cars will be the same, we should have to wait and see. But looking around here, Swinny, not a lot apart from the garages, the stands. It's still the same high-speed ring of old with a bit more spice to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, since this track's original construction in what, 96, I think?
Yeah.
96, 97, there or thereabouts. The only major change is turns 3 and 4 used to be banked. Because, as you said, the original creator of this absolutely loved NASCAR and IndyCar as well as the JGTC over here. But they have since flattened turns 3 and 4 to make it a little bit safer and to slow the cars down at a certain point.
And that would be round 5 on the calendar. Let's actually go through that one by one.
Yes.
Fuji is written down as short course, but we know exactly what layout it is. It's the F1 circuit without the chicane.
Yes, it's in WEC slash Super GT spec.
Yes. My preferred layout.
Same.
But the overtakes that we got in the final round of the Worlds, evidence enough. That bookends the championship which we'll get to. We're going to Yamagiwa in Kyoto for round 2. Most of these are kind of secluded, but it hasn't stopped the fans flocking up north for Media Day. Very secluded part of the world, this, much like our top list later. Yamagiwa, a similar sort of speed circuit, bit less banked, of course, just those couple of hairpins slowing the cars down. One of the faster circuits out there. And then it's into the city for the Tokyo Expressway. Is going to host 2 of the races there. And that'll be apart from, I would say apart from Bathurst being technically a road course and the same for Alsace, that'll be the first time the Super Touring franchise has held a race in a city.
Oh,
No
it's
less.
definitely the
That's round
first
3.
actual out-and-out street circuit. I mean, obviously Bathurst has its own little grey area because technically it's public road, but it's not an inner city streets. So, you know, you're anyone with fond memories of the British touring cars and the Group A days with the Birmingham Super Prix, you know, and anyone who really likes what is it, Macau, where you get World Touring
Macau,
Cars knock up.
To me, the layout I'm seeing has a slight resemblance to the Helsinki circuit that the international version of the DTM would go around, chicanes and all. And then we head to Autopolis, a one-time World Sports Car venue, attempted to get Formula One, notably Super GT venue and Formula Nippon venue, before heading here for perhaps the fastest race of the the season before we head to the Grand Prix layout at Suzuka for the full Suzuka double header there. All these races are going to be double headers, reverse grid, of course. Then to round 7, the slowest of the circuits, and I dare say the slowest circuit in Super Touring as well. All the records being broken here. Tsukuba, very much a club level touring car style circuit, so that should be ideal for these cars. Tsukuba, bit narrower, a lot narrower than the width we're seeing of the start finish straight here at High Speed Ring, for example. And then a flyaway. I didn't expect this to be on the calendar, actually, considering, but there are a lot of these manufacturers in Australia, but Bathurst is going to be round 8 for these cars, much like it is round 2 for the Worlds, and I think that's another reason why the Bathurst round had been rescheduled in the Worlds, so that the Japanese could take up the previous time slot for that round. Then back to Autopolis for one of the shorter layouts. I would say this one lends more to a touring car style race than the full Grand Prix loop at Autopolis would for round 9. And then Suzuka's East Course. NASCAR have used it. Club level touring car have used it. Me and Swinny ourselves have raced around that as well in days gone by. It'll be before your time. And then to cap it all off, I think there's no better way to end this national championship than the double header with the Worlds at the Fuji Grand Prix layout. So that's going to be a very eclectic mix of high speed, tight, twisty, and some natural touring car venues in there, Swinny.
Yeah, absolutely. The bit that's interesting me the most is we're going from one of the longest circuits on the calendar in Suzuka, and we're going to be doing lap times that are 2.5 minutes there with these cars, down to Tsukuba, which is a 1 minute lap time. We're going from the longest to the shortest, and that's going to be such a big hurdle for a lot of these teams to get over, because they'll have set the cars up to be, handling well through the S's at Suzuka and being able to take the 130R the way they need to, and so on and so forth, to throw all of that away. Now we've got to focus on hairpins. That's going to be really interesting.
And acceleration.
That's going to be really interesting for me to see who gets that nailed down and who struggles with that transition there.
I think that's going to be the bigger challenge compared to the streets of Tokyo.
Oh, yeah,
Because
absolutely.
Tokyo is going to have the speed just like High Speed will, Bathurst will, Fuji and Suzuka will,
And Yamagiwa.
and Tsukuba, Yamagiura, of course. That's going to be the equivalent of going to the Hungaroring in Formula One. Qualifying will be key, and whoever finishes 10th in race 2 will be the keys to that particular round then. And it just depends what the actual I was going to say natural hierarchy, but these things are man-made. The racing hierarchy pans out, because it's going to be a completely different deck of cards, so to speak, especially if you see the Crown athletes in a different colour scheme at the back of the pack. Chaser Motorsports have actually bought the cars from the Worlds. When I say bought, Kazuki Ide is one of the drivers. He has in fact bought into that team. He is convinced that Crown athlete should be a race winner. Always was convinced it should have been a race winner in the Worlds, and
Well, it was,
he
just
has
not
actually
enough.
he's bought into that team to make sure that it does happen. Even if the sponsorship side of things, or perhaps the livery on it, is a bit sparse, it must be said.
Yeah, well, this team, I believe, has had its history in the Japanese Hot Hatch Championship, where I think they were running Suzuki Swifts. Please don't quote me on that. I'm not fully confident on that one. But yeah, they've decided to, when they heard about a Japanese Super Touring Regional Championship or National Championship showing up, they wanted in. Ide had these cars that he'd done a deal with Toyota with, and here we are. Yes, sponsorship is a bit light on them. they're definitely going to have that to contend with, because you can see just from the amount of blank space on this car, budget is not their strong suit here, and that's no fault of their own. So they're definitely going to be ones to watch, because of course we know that this Toyota has speed. It has won World Super Touring races in the hands of both Ide and Gordon Butcher. We know these cars have the speed. They are the only cars on this grid, to a degree. The next one will prove a grey area to this fact, but they are the only cars on this grid that have a full 2 years worth of development on them. Everybody else almost is brand new. So
So
that's going to be
Ide,
very interesting to watch as this season unfolds.
Ide in the 21, and we see Ukyo Nomura, the hot hatch champion of the previous season, has been given that particular pew at Chaser Motorsports, E-Day Chaser Motorsports. Now we go on to car 20, which is a Honda. It's perhaps a Honda we haven't seen in quite some time in the
Yes.
Supers,
So
and
shall I
that's
shall I give
Hideki
the interesting
Fujiwara.
history of this one?
Let's go.
Yes, Hideki Fujiwara driving it there. This Civic took part in season 1 of the World Super Touring Championship as a very, very low budget privateer effort, with one Jason Thompson driving it. We all know where he has gone. This car has basically sat in storage, done a few hill climb events, done a bit of club racing here and there under different hands, until this team bought it, with a decent amount of sponsorship behind it. But we know it's an older car. It does have a very definite performance ceiling to it, where you will only be able to develop it so far. I think this team have bought the car because A, it was cheap, and B, they can use it just to learn the ropes with.
Yeah.
I think they will be looking to chop and change this Civic out for something better next year. But for now, they've got this Civic. It is a reliable little monster. It has got a year worth of actual Super Touring dev under it, but then I don't know how much they're going to be able to wrangle out of this car, because obviously where it's done the club events and the hill climbing, a lot of those setups that it had in the Super Touring Championship have been thrown away. So they're kind of starting afresh with this thing, but they're kind of not. This is what I mean by it's in a very weird little grey area.
We know the pedigree of this car. We know this downhill climb. How do we know this? When there's part of the Super Touring franchise, the coding is shown on a plate inside the car, and the coding is STH001. So even fun fact, that is the very first car entered into Super Touring lore, and it's still showing its presence. So that's very happy to see that car on the grid. One of
Absolutely
the newer
deserve to be in
cars,
a
though,
museum once it gets replaced.
yes. This one, on the other hand, uh, part of me wants to think that it is the charcoal void, but that
I
can
can
be.
confirm it is not. This is a
Yes, I kind of
brand new
assumed it's
six.
not as wide. It's
No.
not as wide as.
So this team, I let them come and have a look over the charcoal void. Um, I wouldn't let them buy it outright, but I let them give it a proper once over to see what we'd done with it and how it all worked, and so on and so forth. And we even gave them setup data. I don't know how much it's going to help, because what they've plumped for is essentially a standard Mazda 6, or a Mazda Atenza, as it is sold over here in this country. This one is four-wheel drive. Our beloved charcoal void is rear-wheel drive. This is four-wheel drive, which I think was what put them over the edge into choosing this car over mine. With good sponsorship here, as you see from
Yep,
FedEx
FedEx.
pumping up the money.
Hideki, no, Takuma Nakajima in that car, number 19. A decent colours to it in amongst all the black, white, and red that we've
Yes.
seen so far and are yet to see. Another single outfit, we've got a handful rather than one or two. We now go on to the third of the privateers in a solitary capacity, and another decent colour scheme on it as well. And this is the Brazilian Ana de Grassi, and it's a Golf. Now, we have to give us the backstory on this one, Swinny, because I think this is the one that Suarez started running in back in season 2 of the Worlds.
Okay, well, if that's news to me, actually, I thought they'd bought and built a new car, but you might be right on that. We'll have to see. We'll have to check the little plate that you talked about. But yeah, this is another brand new team who've wanted to expand. Got a hold of a Golf, so they are the only non-Honda front-wheel drive car on this grid.
There's going to be a lot of Hondas by the looks of it.
Well, it's just
Further up the
that the
grid.
only other front-wheel drive cars on the grid are all Civics of some
Honda.
description. So this is an interesting choice, considering this is a championship that allows for all-wheel drive machinery. Going with a front-wheel drive Golf. Again, I'm not 100% sure what kind of deal was done, but another striking livery, just like the FedEx car. We've got good sponsorship, and it's going to be very obvious to see this one in amongst the crowd. And we know what the Golf is good at, and we know what the Golf is less good at. So there will be certain tracks that this Golf might put in a very surprising performance, depending on what the team can get out of it.
Do you think this car's out of its territory? I mean, I don't really associate Volkswagen with doing stuff in Japan.
Well, yes and no. The Japanese have a very interesting relationship with German car makers in that it's seen as like the oddball choice. So obviously in
Right.
Japan, if you're in the luxury car market, there are Toyotas and Lexuses and Hondas. You know, there are different models that we are not sold in Europe that we don't see that are very, very high end and very, very nice. So things like BMW and Mercedes and Audi and to a lesser extent Volkswagen here are kind of seen as like, to give it a bit of a glib wording, the hipster choice, quote
Ha!
unquote.
I suppose, yes.
It's like, oh,
Whatever
I've
the
got something
Japanese mean for
different
hipster
because I've bought
is.
a non-Japanese car in Japan. Yeah, so I think that's why they've gone with this Volkswagen. And there are, corners of Japanese car culture that are into all sorts. I know of one Japanese car club that absolutely adores the Volvo 240, and they've all got one.
Thankfully, there's not one of them in the championship. That would be sticking out like a sore thumb.
Oh, an old
But
turbo brick, yeah, that'd be an interesting thing to see.
um, I think the closest we're going to get to a turbo brick is the next car, which is the BMW M4. We did see it earlier. It's got
Yeah.
Caterpillar all over it, and an interesting driver choice from my perspective because Ellen Frenson will be doing double duty, just not as we know it.
Yes, so she is one of my Mazda drivers in the European series. She's allowed to drive this BMW because it's a privateer effort, so she's not representing two manufacturers here.
Uh, we are going to see a similar manufacturer further up, but I think they went their own way on driver choice, so that meant Frenson kind of had to run privateer in Japan, and we'll see how that goes there. Now, in the Worlds, there would be at most 6 privateer outfits, cars on the grid at least. But here's the next in that particular division. Slightly interesting loophole, shall we say. It's got Mitsubishi input to a very finite, thin amount of percentage for it to qualify as a privateer competitor. It's Mitsubishi. It's red, obviously, because it is Mitsubishi. And this is where another double duty driver comes into play. So Kazunori Nakano is going to be a Japanese regular of sorts, but off the back of a world touring car championship where he has done well, and in fairness, the Euros, the double duty is now switched to both world and Japan for Anthony Ingram.
Yes, so yes, as you rightly put it, whilst this team is getting money from Mitsubishi itself, it is not considered a full works effort. It will be racing for privateer honours, just like the rest of the privateers we see here. It is in a bit of a weird grey space, but it is ultimately a privateer team running these Mitsubishis, you know, I say out of pocket, but they have enough sponsors here to cover those charges. And yeah, Ingram expressed interest in racing in Japan. His agent put some feelers out, and this is where he's ended up. Of course, with the Works Volvo contract, means he can't race any Works cars in this championship here, so he was limited to privateer outfit only, and he's always had a soft spot for Mitsubishis anyways. I believe a Lancer Evo 5, Evo 6 is one of his all-time dream cars, so the fact that he gets to race a poster boy hero is a bit of a dream come true for him. He hasn't got any experience in four-wheel drive machinery though, so that'll be a bit of a learning curve for him. He did tell me over text message the other day after testing this car that the standing starts with this four-wheel drive car are night and day different to a fronty, and he just giggles every time it takes off from the line.
Nice to know. Yeah, so I think the only way he would have got into a works effort, however unlikely, would it be that Volvo we spoke about. But obviously the newer Volvo in a factory capacity, but I don't think they would have even contemplated coming to Japan as well as doing the Worlds. I think they would want to go to Europe first before trying to compete in Japan. So that's why Ingram is a privateer in this championship. And that's your privateer lineup, your fast 8, shall we say. So slightly fast 8, because we're going to have a faster 12 in front of them. And we start off with the I'm so used to saying Hyundai. It's not. It's a Genesis.
It's a Genesis,
It's a
Hyundai's
Genesis.
new luxury brand. This is the G70. This is their flagship five-door saloon car model. This is four-wheel drive. This has a six-cylinder engine in it. It has the most ridiculous gearbox known to mankind with 8 billion gears in it. So these guys are going to be
How many
constant.
actually, Swinny? Come on.
I think it's got 8.
I think it's got 8. Okay.
I think it's got 8. But these guys are going to be constantly on the flappy paddle with this thing.
So Hideo Muto is going to be the regular from previous championships, and from Australia we got Daniel Winterbottom. He has competed for Hyundai in Australia, and Genesis thought it was a logical step for him to come hither and compete in Japan, and therefore should be the favourite to get around Bathurst in a hurry in that car.
Yes, although he is not, as we will see later on, he's not the only Australian in this grid. So he will have a distinct and clear target when it comes to Bathurst of who he wants to beat.
Absolutely.
And that Genesis, with its long wheelbase and its somewhat slippery aerodynamic profile, it might be one of the cars to beat round there. We'll soon find out.
If squint, it does look like a supercar, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, wrong kind of engine for that, unfortunately.
Here's an interesting story. I mean, we know Mazda, your Mazda team, are doing the European leg. This, I don't think this team are sharing any data with you, but it looks can be deceptive.
No.
We've got, so this is Rubens Pizzonia and Keiko Katayama. This is the Japanese Mazda effort, and that's almost the livery that you're running.
It's similar but somewhat different. It's because the car is similar but somewhat different. So this is a Japanese homegrown team. Team Swintech have nothing to do with these cars. These are four-wheel drive Mazda 3s,
right,
as opposed to my front-wheel drive Mazda 3, because they're running the essentially the Mazda Speed sporty model trim line, whatever you want to call it. It's so they can run four-wheel drive cars in this championship here. So yeah, they are slightly different. They have a slightly different aerodynamic profile. They have a vastly different drivetrain profile, as I've just said. And yeah,
so data sharing is going to be impossible.
Pretty much. There's not much I can learn from them, and there's not much they can learn from us. It's very much a case of like we are essentially remote co-workers. Put it that way.
Working from home. Anyway, yeah. So obviously this is now. Hang on a minute. We've got. This is going to be the fourth and fifth four-wheel drive car. That was our seventh, shall we say? Sorry, 7th four-wheel drive cars we've seen on the grid so far, and we haven't even touched the surface of the factory efforts just yet, and we're going to get into that territory shortly, especially if we're going to see Mitsubishi's rivals, and I'm assuming this is where Ingram's going to be aiming for, is the Subaru factory team of Marcus Rostad and Kazuyoshi Takahashi.
Yes, this is. I mean that um, rivalry runs deep. So even though they're in technically different classes, divisions, whatever you want to call it, they're all on track together. They're all racing for overall drivers' honours. So yes, both the Mitsubishis will want to beat the Subarus. Both the Subarus will want to beat the Mitsubishis. That is, tradition must be observed there. But yeah, this Subaru team have put together a good package here. They've got some good talent here. Marius Rostad having a lot of rallycross experience in a Subaru, so he knows how to work a boxer engine very, very well. So yeah, I think this team might be one of the dark horses in this championship.
And I can't see it being any other colour than blue,
No, absolutely
and
not.
obviously the yellow as well. Any combination of side of that, it perhaps should be classed as a factory effort.
Yeah.
So looking the part, and therefore the ones in front of these guys are also looking the part, but someone at Mercedes must be having some kind of aim high here, because I did not expect there to be any Mercedes taking part in Japan. But here we are. The four-wheel drive rules have allowed Mercedes to bring their hatchback to Japan and bring two of their academy drivers over from Japan, from Germany rather, Karl Schumacher and Timo Lotra. That is a four-wheel drive hatchback outside of its natural habitat.
Yeah, so the AMG A Class is a four-wheel drive car at the showroom. And what I said before about German cars kind of being the hipster choice in Japan, Mercedes are well aware of that. They're looking to try and boost their sales a little bit, try and become a little bit more mainstream, and they figured this was the best way for it. Put on an all-German effort with an all-German lineup to show what, you know, German car makers can do in a factory sense. And there, there's been vague rumblings about them taking part in the World Super Touring Championship, but I think the four-wheel drive aspect was the sticky issue.
Yeah,
So the fact that they can now run the cars they want in a series in the form that they want was really the thing that tipped them over the edge for putting together this deal here.
it's an awkward one because there's not really a front or rear wheel drive variant of that car that is able to compete in both the Worlds or the Euros, respectively.
You
So,
could use the standard model, but then you'd be lacking a lot of power and displacement in the engine and what have you. So I can understand their thought process here. And obviously, anything
before we
bigger has got a big V8 in it, so that's out of the question.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing that I thought maybe it should not, that's not going to fit either. The Super Touring franchise, however strict, throws up interesting little tidbits like a Mercedes in Japan. It's going to make me laugh. I try my best not to as the season progresses, but we shall have to. I want to ask how. I'm resisting the urge to ask how they're going to fare, because I want to get these next two teams out of the way first, and they are going to be familiar sights to any regular of Super Touring,
I mean, the next one
especially the
especially
Worlds.
because the livery will be rather familiar, just with slightly different
Yeah,
details here and there.
I'll shut my eyes first, so I'll just have us assume that if it is Honda, it's going to be red, white, and black. Hey!
Oh, would you look at that?
Now we have got Satoru Suzuki and Jack Scaife, two relative newcomers to Super Touring. It's cars we're used to, but drivers that will want to shine straight off the line in race one. especially as this is going to be the other favourite for Bathurst. But I think he's going to be undermined by a front-wheel drive Honda going up Mountain Straight compared to
Yeah.
the four-wheel drive of the Genesis in
This is going to be Honda's
Winterborn.
biggest challenge here. Is obviously we know how good this car is, but as I said down the back of the privateer grid, they're the only front wheel drive um, works outfit. The only other front wheel drive cars are privateers. They are absolutely going to have their work cut out to try and beat these four wheel drives. They're going to get mugged off the line so often. So they've got to work on their qualifying. So when they do get mugged, they don't go too far back down the order. And they're going to have to work on making this car come alive in the second part of the race so they can, take advantage of the four wheel drive cars burning out their front tires like they are inevitably going to do.
I'm trying to work out where they could capitalise. I mean, if they get front row or at least pole at Tsukuba or one of them finishes 10th, that's their best shot of doing well. But obviously,
Or
it's
if they
still
get
early
the
days
setup
yet.
right at, either even round here at High Speed Ring or at Bathurst, they could have the straight line speed advantage to carry them past a lot of these other cars.
Before we go on to the top team, then Yokohama being the sole supplier in a similar capacity to Goodyear in the Worlds. Um, the Super Touring franchise have deemed fit that Yokohama should be the tyre supplier, being of Japan themselves. Makes sense. And the same can be said for the fuel supply as well. But then let's see what is going to be at the front of the field. This is going to be the big news of the championship. This is a team that, despite putting a good, well, what seemed to be a decent effort in a rear-wheel drive Crown Athlete, this is a complete sort of lane change, if ever there was one. It's a four-wheel drive hatchback. We've got Gordon Butcher over from the Worlds, and we've got Aiko Naruse on the car. Naruse Nomura, which is why he's got Nomura on the side there. But his surname is Naruse in the entry list. This will be make or break for Toyota in any touring car capacity before we consider their rallying and sports car pedigree. This is going to be, um, you know, great if it pays off, but an absolute disaster if it doesn't. In all honesty,
Yeah, so Toyota have their own fair share of touring car history. I mean, there was they used the Carina in the British touring cars. The Chaser was used in the Japanese touring cars back in the '90s Super Touring era. There were Supra Group A cars. But yeah, this was the car. Every time we talked about Toyota wanting the ability to run a four-wheel drive car, this was what they wanted to run, the GR spec Corolla. And this is where the rules have found them. And they've said, well, we want to run a four-wheel drive car. If we can run a four-wheel drive car in Japan, we'll just run it in Japan. So be it. They brought Butcher on. They honoured his contract. So it'll be good to see what he can do with a car that is built from the ground up to win races. But yeah, this is the Toyota that's been kicking up such a big stink.
and it just depends if it does stink or actually freshens up. Oh my god, I cringe when I said that. The entire Japanese Super Touring fraternity in its inaugural 11 races throughout the year. We'll try and broadcast them on parallel, opposite sort of weeks of the World Series. Predictions for this one, I mean, we may as well put names in a hat here. I think this is going to be the most shuffled up of the championships, if ever there was one, because whilst there is factory input, I still think there's a lot of factory input right the way through the grid here. Even if the Crown Athlete is considered privateer, even if the Mitsubishi is considered privateer, I think any of these cars could win a race this season. It just depends whoever gets the best luck out of that shuffle, shall we say. Even the Mercedes could win. Even if it's not Tsukuba, even if it's not a circuit where four-wheel drive would thrive, shall we say, around the mountains of Bathurst, around the streets of Tokyo. Yeah, what do you reckon? I mean, do you think the same way,
Yeah,
Svenny?
it's difficult to predict. We know the Honda's a good package, but it is front-wheel drive. Toyota have been developing that Corolla for a very long time because they wanted to run it in the World Series. That Subaru has got some very capable hands driving them. You know, this Genesis has got a good engine in it and a very good gearbox, and it could be an absolute weapon. And then, yeah, we can't discount any of these privateer teams because they are all getting a little bit of factory help here and there. I mean, Japan is the most switched on when it comes to that sort of thing. So I think the only team, I don't want to jinx it, obviously, but the only team I feel like will struggle out and out is that Golf. That eBay Golf, I think, has got its work cut out for it, and the older FK2 model Civic there,
The
to a
oldest
degree.
car on the grid, the
Yes.
very first. I mean, that was it was amazing to see that. I mean, the next one I think has actually been like the tags have been removed, and therefore that would, if it was to come back, wouldn't be allowed back in Super Touring. That's how important those little tags are. Those little metal seal of approval from the franchise of Super Touring, especially for these Toyotas. There's going to be some great underdog stories. There's going to be some great rivalries throughout, the drivers, but also the manufacturers. This is going to be the biggest hive of that particular rivalries, shall we say. We're going to see how these guys fare in testing around here. I don't think it's going to give us any indicator on race performance, but top speed should be an interesting one. Maybe the front wheel drives have it around here, but maybe they won't around Tsukuba. But that's for another time. Next broadcast then is going to be in Interlagos, and that's going to be for the Worlds. And another good year of Super Touring action on the way, Swinny.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is fantastic to see this expansion. We've gone from just having the one championship that covers the entire globe to having a secondary championship that covers all of Europe. We've now got a tertiary, secondary championship that covers Japan. Let's hope that the rumblings about an American regional national championship are also true, because that would be great to have four unique super touring championships, each with their own identity and their own slight tweak to the same core rule set. It's just going to become such a huge franchise that's just providing entertainment the world over. I would just like to make one more small point, because I forgot this on the run up the grid. That FedEx sponsored Mazda, that's a diesel. That car is going to be acting very, very
Ah,
differently coming out of corners and with its fuel usage and what have you. I don't know if it's going to make a huge change in the way it races and the way it performs with its rivals there, but that is another factor to be aware of. That Mazda 6 is a diesel.
so that weight that it's got on board should be counteracted by the lightness of how much fuel it doesn't need in the car compared to the petrol in
And the
the
amount of
others.
torque it
So,
puts out at a low rev range.
so not only different sights, but different sounds to be had in the inaugural Japanese Super Touring Championship. Round one at Fuji will be shown after the Interlagos World Round, and once again, we'll shall have to see what happens. Um, yeah, looking forward to what's in store for both here and season 4 of the Worlds. On behalf of Michael Swinnerton, this is Adrian Michael Rees, and we'll see you in Brazil. Good racing, everyone.